This preview of the Max Level podcast is brought to you by Technisport Gaming Chairs. Use offer code LDG to save 10% whenever you make a purchase on a brand new gaming chair, desk, or accessories. To hear the show in its entirety every Monday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern, please subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app of choice. That's going to bring us into something that I have been dying to talk about here for several weeks, and I want to discuss with you and speculate on where we think the franchise of The Legend of Zelda may be going in 2019 and beyond, because there have been several things that have happened as of late to give us kind of a indicator, so to speak, where things might be going. The first one here that I want to touch on before we start speculating on something new, the first thing that I want to touch on is the fact that Skyward Sword HD, that is probably going to be a thing sometime soon.
Practically confirmed already, would you say?
Kinda not. So I pulled up something from Eurogamer, and if you remember several weeks back, Eiji Aonuma appeared on stage at a Zelda music concert in Osaka, Japan, and made a joke saying kind of like something like, I quote, "I know what you are thinking, Skyward Sword for Switch, right?" End quote. And he was just kind of like making a joke, kind of like the same thing that Arnie Roth did before the Final Fantasy XII HD game was confirmed at a Distant Worlds concert. Something similar to that. And then social media started blowing up about, oh my God, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD coming to Nintendo Switch, blah, blah, blah. And then Nintendo actually put out a statement several days later saying that, and of course, this is Nintendo obviously not showing their cards right away in case this is true, but they said, quote, "At this time, we have no plans to release The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on Nintendo Switch," end quote. That was it. That's all they said. But I mean, can't take that for anything because it hasn't been officially confirmed yet. So why would they say, yeah, we're totally doing that? It's coming out in the summer of 2019. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to just come out and say that. So of course they're going to, on the record, deny it until it's been officially revealed. But I have some interesting information to point out, which has to point to something Legend of Zelda happening in 2019. Now we're going to take a look at the timeline of release years for The Legend of Zelda. And I pulled this information off of Wikipedia, and we're going to start with 1998, because in the early years of Zelda, it wasn't nearly as often as we get now. I mean, we had The Legend of Zelda in 86. We had The Adventure of Link in 87. Then we didn't get A Link to the Past until 91. Link's Awakening was 93. And then we had a 5-year break. Starting with Ocarina of Time, it gets interesting because 1998 had Ocarina of Time and Link's Awakening DX. 1999 didn't have anything. 2000 had Majora's Mask. 2001 had Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. 2002 had Four Swords and The Wind Waker. 2003 had The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition. 2004 had Four Swords Adventures and The Minish Cap. 2005 was an off year. 2006 was Twilight Princess. 2007 was Phantom Hourglass. 2008 was an off year. 2009 was Spirit Tracks. 2010 was an off year. 2011 was Ocarina of Time 3D and Skyward Sword. 2012 was an off year. 2013 was The Wind Waker HD and A Link Between Worlds. 2014 was an off year. 2015 was Majora's Mask 3D and Triforce Heroes. 2016 was Twilight Princess HD, and 2017 was Breath of the Wild. 2018, it is the final day of 2018. There is not a single Zelda stealth releasing this year. It is New Year's Eve as of the day of this posting. No Zelda is coming out in 2018. So 2018 is an off year.
Well, what if they say it before the ball drops? They're like,
Zelda's out now. No, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
Since 1998, there has been a Zelda game at least every other year. Since we didn't get something in 2018, all signs are pointing to something Zelda releasing in 2019. Whether that's a new game, whether that's a port, whether that's an HD remaster, or something else entirely. Something Legend of Zelda main line will release in 2019. And I think that has to be Skyward Sword HD. I do. I think that's going to be the game for 2019.
It's the most logical of them all.
Yeah.
Because I feel that if they were doing, let's say, a direct sequel, I will speculate a little bit.
Yeah.
But if they were doing like a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, I feel like part of that would have leaked already.
Yeah, probably. I think you're right. I think we have to assume that I don't even know if it'll be announced in the beginning of the year Nintendo Direct. I'm not sure
Doubtful.
when they're going to pull the veil off of Skyward Sword HD and say that it's a thing. A lot of times when that kind of stuff is happening, they won't announce a remaster or a port or an HD remake until a couple months until it's ready to go. Like they'll put it out and then they'll say like available in like 2 or 3 months. So unless the game is coming out in spring, we may not hear about it at the beginning of the year in that first Direct.
Our January Direct is normally the stuff that comes out in the summer, is it not?
Spring and summer usually, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
More often spring. Like they focused on the first half of the year for the January Direct.
Oh,
and then
usually up to like April. Like
yeah, April or May, exactly. Because they don't even usually touch on June. June they usually save for E3. I think that a full Breath of the Wild sequel or the next quote unquote mainline Zelda game is still about a year or two away. I think that it will be a swan song type of game for the Nintendo Switch. One of be the last things that Nintendo puts out for it. Much like I think that I think they are working on something else Mario related, like a continuation of Mario Odyssey. But I think that game is also not going to come out in 2019. I still don't think, because you had 2 entries in your 2 biggest franchise in 2017, the first year of the Nintendo Switch with Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. You have to assume that either in one of those 2 franchises will see a new game in 2020. The other one will be in 2021 is how I'm kind of thinking. I don't know that they'll ever put out both again in the same year. If they did, that'd be great. If they did it in 2019, that'd be awesome, man. I would be so happy if we got a new entry in both Mario and Zelda in 2019. But because of the fact we're getting new Super Mario Brothers U in just a couple weeks at the beginning of January, plus Mario Odyssey just releasing a little over a year ago, I think that the next mainline Mario game is still a little bit of years away. At least Zelda came out at the beginning of 2017 in March, whereas Odyssey was in October, almost November. So there's a little bit more development time there. So I do think Zelda will come first. The fact that we are getting new Super Mario Brothers U, though, which is a port of a Wii U game, maybe that kind of is also a clue that Zelda will also get a remaster or a port in 2019 for Skyward Sword. So I'm trying to just think of everything that's physically possible here, pointing to signs of Skyward Sword next year.
And will you play Skyward Sword?
If the motion controls are removed, yes. Or if they are toned down.
They don't have to remove them, though, because
they don't have to remove them because they can use the Joy-Con. I know. Much to my dismay, you can use the Joy-Con. However, much like you can't play Pokemon Let's Go with the Joy-Con in handheld mode they had to come up with a different way to do it. Because of that, there would have to be a different way to control Link in Skyward Sword if you were playing handheld mode using the Joy-Cons on your Switch. So if they have the motion controls with the Joy-Con, if you're playing it docked, as long as they remove it for the handheld portion, I'll play it in handheld mode.
The game doesn't have to have a handheld mode, though.
It will. It absolutely will. They would be crazy.
It more than likely will, but Nintendo has put out games where you can't play in handheld mode. Case in point would be Super Mario Party.
No, I know, but I think they would be crazy to release a big game like that and not allow people to play it on the go, because the point of the Switch is to play it on the go.
That's one of the major selling points between me and my friends of are we going to get this on the Switch or not?
Yeah.
Is, hey, I want to play this game everywhere. Like I kind of want Skyrim for the Switch. I haven't gotten it yet, but I kind of want it just because I want to be able to play Skyrim wherever. Exactly.
And if they put out a major adventure game like Zelda, where these games typically can be anywhere from 30 to however many hours you want to put into it, looking for secrets and clearing it completely, up to 80 hours or so.
You're going into Frank territory. Okay.
If you limit the uniqueness of the Switch and that you can play any game anywhere, I think that would be stupid of them not to include a handheld mode. I think the reason why Super Mario Party doesn't is because of the fact that when you're playing together, you are playing a different kind of Mario Party and you're linking your Switches together and doing that Toad's, whatever the hell it's called, Rec Room or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But at least you are still playing the game. You're just not playing the actual game that you're playing on the TV. So I guess that's going to bring us into some speculation here on where we think The Legend of Zelda is going to move after Breath of the Wild. And be warned, there may be some spoilers in this discussion because it's going to be hard to kind of avoid things that happened during Breath of the Wild. So if for whatever reason you haven't finished Breath of the Wild yet and you don't want to hear us talking about where we think the franchise of Zelda is going to move as we get into 2019 and beyond, maybe just skip ahead, 20 minutes or so We'll be talking about cheats and secrets next. So if you skip ahead and hear us talking about that, then you're good to go. You can go back a little bit and try to find where we stopped talking about it. But for now, I think that I really want to dive in and not only talk about Breath of the Wild and what happened in that and where we think the game may have taken place in the timeline, but where we think the game and franchise could go after Breath of the Wild and the events that happened there. So I want to kick things off with where we think Breath of the Wild fits in the Legend of Zelda timeline before we speculate on what we think is going to come next. And I think we're both in agreement on where we think this fits.
The end.
The very end of the timeline. And a possible merger of the three timelines again. So for those unfamiliar, the way the Legend of Zelda timeline works is that you have Skyward Sword, that's the beginning. Then you have the Minish Cap, then you have Four Swords, and then you have Ocarina of Time. Based on the events that happened in 1998's Ocarina of Time, the timeline splits into three. So if Link had been defeated in Ocarina of Time and Ganon had won, that splits off and starts a timeline known as Hyrule's Decline and the Last Hero. From there, you get A Link to the Past, Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages, Link's Awakening, The Legend of Zelda on NES, and The Adventures of Link. That's your timeline for if Link was happened to be defeated in Ocarina of Time. If Link is successful and defeats Ganon and goes back in time as a child to relive, his life because he went forward in time in Ocarina of Time with the time travel stuff. So if he goes back in time and starts again as a child, that is your second timeline known as the Dark World and the Hero's Descendants. That continues, a direct continuation from Ocarina of Time with Majora's Mask. It's the same Link, followed by Twilight Princess, which that Link does appear in Twilight Princess again. And then finally Four Swords and Hyrule Adventure, which is separate from Four Swords. If Link stays an adult in Ocarina of Time and does not go back in time, that creates the third timeline, known as the Adult Era and the Hero of Wind and a New World. After Ocarina of Time, you would then get the Wind Waker, followed by Phantom Hourglass, and finally Spirit Tracks.
That's the darkest timeline.
Well, the Wind Waker is one of the best Zelda games ever created, though. Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, not so much. That timeline needs another Zelda game. We'll say that right now. It needs another one that's good. Every other timeline has fantastic games, just not that one so much. Just Wind Waker. But I guess Wind Waker is good enough for everything in there, so it doesn't matter. But how we think this happened is that somewhere in the distant future, these three timelines somehow reformed under one, because in Breath of the Wild, there's so many different landmarks and so many different names and so many different references to not only things that happened in Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess and the Wind Waker and Link to the Past. And there's references to every single timeline. So the only thing that makes sense is for the game to be at the very end and be a reunification of the three timelines. That doesn't mean they can't go back and put other games in these three timelines. That just means that you now have a single timeline split into three, reconvened back into one, and continues again. The timeline is going to get confusing. It will, because they could split it again if they wanted to. We could have the single timeline split into three, back into one, split into four, back into one eventually. Like they could keep doing that kind of stuff.
Too much.
It is too much, but they could keep doing that if they wanted to.
I prefer the olden days where they were all just different links.
They are still all different links, except for a certain few. They still are all different links.
Just different descendants.
Yeah, descendants of Link and Zelda. Every time there needs to be a hero, there's somebody in the world that will, quote unquote, become Link, is how the whole story is told. I think the only ones that are the same are Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and then you see the shadow version of that Link in Twilight Princess as like a ghost. And then The Legend of Zelda on NES and Adventure of Link stars the same Link as well. But other than that, it's different Links. So if we're in agreement that Breath of the Wild takes place at the very end of the timeline, here's where it's going to get interesting. Where do we think that The Legend of Zelda is going to go with their next mainline entry, probably in 2020 or 2021? And I'm going to let you go first. What do you think is going to happen here?
I think we're going even further into the future, like not just direct continuation. I'm talking like we're jumping ahead 200, 300, 500 years, maybe 1,000 years. and with the futuristic kind of vibe, almost like a Final Fantasy high technology kind of vibe.
Okay.
It's still, it's still gonna be the same kind of deal. Maybe I don't know how we're gonna bring Ganon back. Spoiler alert: we killed him. We killed that ass.
Well, we kill him all the time, but he always comes back.
For good. We killed him for good.
No, we kill him every game, and he always happens to come back. So he'll come back. Trust me.
The cult of Ganon will resurrect him.
I don't think isn't it told like in the actual lore that he can't be officially defeated? Like you can't officially defeat him. You just seal him away for a set number of years.
Well, you can't officially defeat him. I am the best. No, that's how the lore is. He can't, just like there always has to be the triumvirate, so to speak. There always has to be a Ganon, a Link, and a Zelda.
Yeah, a Triforce.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
They call it the low force and low roll, right?
I guess so.
But yes, I think something like that's going to happen. It's going to be more futuristic. Because if you remember the original, they said with the original idea for what Legend of Zelda was microchips instead of actual, just Triforces as being like big bright things. Because he's supposed to be a link between all these things, a literal link, like hyperlink.
Right.
So I could see a futuristic Zelda. Do I want it? Probably not.
No, I think I prefer the more high fantasy settings, like, like the traditional type stuff that we've gotten. I wouldn't be opposed to playing something that dabbled with like Machina and that kind of stuff, where you have like these machines and everything everywhere. Like you mentioned, like Final Fantasy. I wouldn't be opposed to that because I love Final Fantasy. I just think that high fantasy fits with Zelda so much better. I don't know.
I agree with you. I try to think where could they possibly go with this, because in my opinion, there's only really two ways you can go: all the way forward or all the way back.
Well, I'm going to take the opposite then.
There you go.
I'm going to take the opposite. If you're going to go all the way forward, I'm going to go all the way back and say that is actually what I think is going to happen with the next mainline Legend of Zelda game. I don't think we're going to go back in, explore the first game ever in the series again. Like, I don't think, that would be Skyward Sword, and we're going to see that probably next year.
Even original Legend of Zelda HD remake. Oh my god.
Well, yeah.
Stop.
No, there actually is a rumor out there that Link's Awakening is the next one to get a remake and not Skyward Sword, which I would be okay with that too. Like if they put Link's Awakening on either 3DS or Switch, that could be your 2019 Zelda game as well. I'd prefer it on Switch, but I'd play it on 3DS.
Oh, I would totally kill the Windfish.
Yeah, I would prefer it on Switch, but I would be okay with playing it on 3DS as well. But we know that Skyward Sword is the very first Zelda game in the official Zelda timeline, because the way the timeline goes, you have the era of the world's creation where heaven and earth were created, and it's split into different eras. From the era of the world's creation, we have the era of the goddess Hylia and the Sky era. That is where Skyward Sword takes place. That directly follows the era of the world's creation. So the goddess Hylia is reincarnated in ancient battle, and it happens and everything is returned to the earth, is basically the gist of Skyward Sword. And then there's a gap between the next game. And the next game in the timeline, as I mentioned earlier, is the Minish Cap, which takes place in the Force era, where the evil god Vati is born. And Four Swords, you have Vati resurrected, and then something called the Hyrule Unification War takes place, and then you have Ocarina of Time. But there's two eras in between Skyward Sword and the Minish Cap, which do happen, and they are on the official timeline, which do not have a game associated with them. Every other era, besides these two, and besides one era in the hero is defeated timeline, which would be the golden era, where the Triforce, it says the Triforce uses monarchy. I don't know. It's right before the Legend of Zelda and right before the tragedy of Princess Zelda the First. There's that era where we could potentially go, but I don't think so. I think we're going to go back even further to the era of chaos, where the Sacred Realm is sealed, and the era of prosperity, where Hyrule Kingdom was first established. Because we saw in Breath of the Wild, Hyrule Kingdom in ruins, and we had, Hyrule Castle, and we had to explore like this crumbling place, and the Temple of Time was completely destroyed except for a few things here and there, and everything was just pretty much in the land of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. Lon Lon Ranch was gone. Everything was in ruins. Like you could pick out certain points and I remember that from a previous game, but everything was pretty much destroyed. I think it would be cool now to see everything be established for the first time ever. So I pulled up something here on the official Zelda Gamepedia website, And I have a description of the era of chaos and the era of prosperity. And I want to read basically kind of like what happened in those two eras.
Okay. Okay.
So the era of chaos is also known as the sealing of the sacred realm. Following the defeat of Demise, the world created by the golden goddesses and guarded by the goddess Hylia became known as Hyrule. Those descendants from the people who were living in ancient times under the protection of the goddess Hylia were known as Hylians. They were born with magic-infused blood, endowing them with psychic powers and skill in wizardry. It is also believed that the Hylians' pointed ears allow them to hear the messages of the gods. Hyrule knew many years of peace, however. The legend of the Triforce, which was located in the Sacred Realm, spread throughout the land. Its power was lusted after by so many people, and a wave of chaos descended upon the land of Hyrule as people tried to take this power for themselves. To protect the sacred power, Rauru, the Sage of Light, constructed the Temple of Time, which contained the only entrance to the Sacred Realm. Rauru sealed the entrance with the Master Sword and closed the chamber of the Master Sword behind the Door of Time. The spiritual stones acted as keys to opening the door. The Temple of Light, located at the center of the Sacred Realm, became the resting place of the Triforce, while Rauru remained in the temple to protect the sacred relic. And then we go to the era of prosperity. Those with the blood of the goddess Hylia, reborn as Zelda, established the Kingdom of Hyrule. Hyrule Castle was built at the center of the land, watching over the Temple of Time, which was protecting the Sacred Realm and the Triforce. Many years passed after the kingdom's establishment. Within the royal family of Hyrule, as descendants of the goddess, many were born with a special power that existed deep within the bloodline, and the queen would often be named Zelda after the historical legend. That's how you always have your Zelda, who are the descendants of the first Hylia and the first Zelda is from Skyward Sword. So, knowing that, and Nintendo likes to infuse other tidbits that were left out of the official timeline when they released the Hyrule Historia. So there could be other things that happened during the era of chaos and the era of prosperity that hasn't officially been said yet, that they themselves don't know yet. They're going to just make it up as they make the next game, is what I'm saying here. So we start out the next Zelda game in the era of chaos, and there's some type of big bad character who is trying to get into the Sacred Realm and, you know, steal the Triforce for themselves. But I think for this game, unless you somehow make a character who's not a hero, because this is also like the era of no hero or whatever, like there's not actually a hero in this particular area, then you would need to potentially play this game as Zelda. This may be Zelda's first starring role in a Legend of Zelda game.
First?
Where are we counting the CDI?
Okay, first.
But I would be okay with it. It would be a different experience, but I would be okay with it because I really want to play a game where we are establishing Hyrule for the first time, and maybe having some type of control over like city building of Hyrule and being able to place buildings and place shops and place landmarks, place locations. You don't have to. I'm just throwing out ideas there. There could be a building mechanic to Hyrule, much like there's a building mechanic to Ni no Kuni 2 or Dark Cloud or White Knight Chronicles. Like you could do something like that. But even if there isn't, and you just get to see Hyrule getting built while you're out there trying to stop these people, and it could be multiple people. It doesn't have to be one big bad. It could be like a cult or a subsect that is trying to take over the Sacred Realm and get access to the Temple of Time and get in there and take the Triforce. And you could just be going out there and stopping all these random people. Meanwhile, you're going back and you're doing side quests and mainline quests and helping Hyrule get built. I think that would be a fantastic game. I think that'd be cool. And I think that's what I want next. And I'm hoping that's the case.
How about we combine our ideas into one awesome idea?
I don't know if that's possible.
So Future Link
goes back in time.
Goes back in time to change the events of his dystopian future, leaping from link to link throughout the timelines.
Oh,
with the aid of, I don't know, Navi or something like that. So
I am not opposed to that. I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, like leaping through, and every leap he's hoping will be his final leap home, where everything will be solved and great again.
Okay.
So pretty much the plot of Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
But
in the Zelda timeline.
Yes.
I think that would be okay, especially now if you didn't have
especially like you said, exploring an era that we haven't explored yet.
Yeah, would be super cool. But I think it would be interesting, like if we are in the distant future and we have a Link in this dystopian world that is falling apart and we have to save it somehow. If in the opening cutscenes or like the prologue to the game, you are quickly taking control of like, oh my God, I'm playing through Zelda 1. Like, this is like Link's like, where am I at? This is so like, why does it look like this? And then you get thrown into like Link to the Past and he's like, whoa, okay, this is a little bit better here. And then it like thrusts you to the one where he's like, oh my God, it's flooded. No, this can't be. And then you go like,
what? I'm a cartoon.
Yeah. Like, I think that would be actually kind of cool. Like, and then finally you end up in an era in a game that you've not played before. And then you pick it up right from there. I think could be something that would work.
I do kind of, I'm not big on city building mechanics, but I kind of like the fact that like if you're like rebuilding the future, like literally, if you play something somewhere, we're essentially creating a new timeline.
Right. So then you could have a timeline split from there, because then you have then you have a new timeline where anything beyond this game now hasn't taken place. There is no Minish Cap. There is no Four Swords. There is no Ocarina of Time, because you've prevented all of that. So now you have a timeline where all of that didn't happen. So you could still have another game in the original timeline, but now you have this brand new timeline that just has Skyward Sword and whatever they're going to call the next game. And then they could do whatever they want and have free reign.
Earthbound Shield.
So I think that's an interesting concept. And I don't know, man, I would be okay with either one of those two things happening.
And if it does happen exactly as I said it, I want my royalties. Okay.
we know you're listening out there, Nintendo.
Being that I said it here on the Level Down Games podcast, I am willing to give 15% to Brian if it happens.
Okay.
What? I'll pay tribute.
Sure. No, appreciate it. No, thank you so much. I just know that over the next 2 years, obviously 2019 is going to be a big year for Nintendo. I think we will start hearing rumblings about the next mainline Zelda game in 2019, whether that's official or through leaks. I think we will start hearing some shadow drops here and there and, tidbits from insiders, being dropped, like what's coming. But I do think we are going to obviously get something related to Zelda in 2019, whether that is Skyward Sword HD, whether that is a remake of Link's Awakening, or whether that is just something completely different, but not a mainline game. Because like I said, since 1998, there hasn't been more than just 1 year where we didn't get something. Like they've skipped years, but they've never skipped 2 years. If they skipped at 2018 and 2019, that would be the first time since 1991 they've done that, which would be crazy. Or 1993, sorry.
Don't do that to me. You'll break my heart.
Yeah, I want a new Zelda in 2019. I don't care if it's a new Zelda, but I want a Zelda in 2019, whether that's Skyward Sword, Link's Awakening, or something different. So I'm glad that we had different ideas there. That was fun. That was really cool. Thanks for checking out a preview of the Max Level Podcast. If you enjoyed what you just heard, be sure to click that subscribe button and turn notifications on, leave a like, and drop a comment down below. To hear the show in its entirety at 5 a.m. every Monday morning, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app of choice. We'll see you next time.